Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Live at the Waterhole. We're first up. We're in the KwaZulu province of South Africa, the Tembe Elephant Park, with some wonderfully big bull elephants here. And, well, what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirst and cool off. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the Wild Earth website and registering. You can also join the conversations formerly known as Twitter using the hashtag Wild. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it on through. Yesterday was a lovely, balmy summer's day, and so we did have lots of elephants down at all the different waterholes. And lovely start here with some of these really big bulls. We had 1 ton also yesterday at Doldonyo, and a couple of other big bull elephants as well. No, it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before. But lovely to see a nice breeding herd coming in as well. A couple of warthogs scampering about on the opposite bank. Lots of ellies already. Fantastic. And I have mentioned it before, but in case you didn't know, the Tembe Elephant Park is around a 30,000 hectare game reserve in Maputoland, which is in the KwaZulu-Natal province of South Africa. It's adjacent to the Ndumo Game Reserve, established in 1980 to protect the elephants, obviously, as suggests, which used to migrate between Maputoland and southern Mozambique. These elephants were traumatized by poaching during the civil war in Mozambique. So the park was only opened to the public in 1991. And it's now home to 250 elephants, which are the largest in the world. There's a few sort of claims to this, both here in KwaZulu-Natal, up into Mozambique, right up into Kenya. They also claim that, but also the Angolan southern Angolan and northern Namibian elephants also have a claim to this. I think there's some of the largest tusks, particularly in these parts on the eastern side of South Africa, but I think that there may be some larger masked animals, not per se with their tusks, in that Angola region. Anyway, so there is one called Isilo, which is the largest living tusker in the southern hemisphere, but unfortunately, 2015. But he was here in the park, and 200 more elephants, which used to be part of the same group, live in the Maputo Elephant Reserve in Mozambique. And with the Lubombo Transfrontier Conservation Area, it's actually planned to link the two reserves, and the Lubombo Conservancy in Eswatini, formerly Swaziland, in a single transfrontier reserve. But like with a lot of these corridored plans, it often stalls for a number of reasons, and this one is quite difficult because it also goes across international boundaries from South Africa to Eswatini and into Mozambique. So lots of bureaucracy, and does work very quickly. So Sandy Franklin, first up, saying good morning, Ralph. Straight back at you, Sandy Franklin. Nice to have you on board once again. Stephen Boyd also saying hello from the UK. Welcome with us. Mercedes Bean, greetings, Ralph. Great to have you back. Happy Friday. Absolutely. And happy Friday to everybody who's watching. It's going to be nice, exciting wildlife viewing. Vic Langford saying hi from a very wet UK. I'd much rather be there. Very different weather. But we do have a massive cold front coming up, going to be going right across into the Highveld and then potentially moving up into the eastern parts. There will be snow-covered peaks from tonight onwards, and so the Drakensberg will be getting it. The Highveld is going to be extremely cold, so good luck to anybody up there. Luckily, I'm down in the east, so we're just going to be getting quite a bit of rain. Not too cold for us, but we do feel it coming through from the Drakensberg and Hogsback area, and then that'll start extending up into these parts in KwaZulu-Natal. So generally, before you have these fronts moving in, you have a lot of hot air moving and being pushed in front of it. So the last few days have actually been very hot down on the coast, and it's going to switch around completely now, and it's going to be very, very cold for the next little while. So the animals, I'm sure, will be enjoying the heat, but I think things will change in the days to come, that we might not have as many elephants in the next while, because it's going to really get a lot colder. So I think we'll enjoy today, but it is indeed going to change. That's the only constant out in the bush. So lovely start with these big bull elephants here, but I think time to change of place because we've got another sighting elsewhere. But we're going to go to the Eastern Cape province of South Africa and Founders Lodge. With something completely different. You can see the weather that I'm speaking of starting to come in. We've gone down the coast here, down into the Eastern Cape from KwaZulu-Natal, but this will sooner or later reach there as well. But the temperature has really dropped over the last 24 hours, that's for sure. But nice to have this rhino coming in for a drink. What a picture. You see a little bit of the ribs showing there on the rhino itself. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean that it's actually looking in perfect condition. You want a little bit of the ribs showing, not too much, obviously, but it just means that the animal is fit and strong. There's not too much, it's not overweight. That's a big exhale. It looks like a bull, and he's had his drink and slowly moving off now. So, as Bo was saying, good afternoon, Ralph. Weather looks lovely there. Rain lashing down here on the east coast of the UK. Well, you can see it was great in KwaZulu Natal, but it's not so great here in the Eastern Cape, where this cold front is now really moving in. Lots of wind, and it's bringing with it a very cold temperature, and there will be then also lots of rain coming with it. So, looks like we're getting a little bit of your weather. I wish we could send this weather up to the likes of Madikwe Game Reserve, and they can get a bit of rain there. They surely need it. Is he having a scratch on the tree? Looks like it. And it's really interesting that between the black and the white rhinos, the square-lipped versus the hook-lipped, such different behavior between them and demeanor as well. Where the white rhino normally pretty relaxed and chilled out, whereas the black rhino really highly strung, quite nervous and quite aggressive. Very different in their behaviors. And Bill Myrtle Beach saying, good morning from my side of the rock, Luyanda and Ralph. Straight back at you, Bill Myrtle. And Sandy Franklin saying, what an amazing scene. Absolutely. Always nice to get up and close with these animals, especially when they don't even know that we're there. So Moye was asking a very interesting question. Hi everybody, what shape does a serval's pupil have, fully dilated? Now that's a good question, Moye. And in fact, serval's eyes they are yellowish, and the pupils contract into like a spindle shape. This is in bright light, and then there's also a dark stripe above and at the corner of the eye. But for interest's sake, it's essential for predators to accurately determine the distance to their prey. So vertically slit pupils help them to do this. And you do get a few examples of this: the serval, the African wildcat, crocodiles, and also puff adders. So all of those ambush hunters that they like to wait and hide, and then when the animals or prey species come past, they ambush them from there. And so those are all classic examples: African wildcat, serval, crocodile, and puff adders of specialized ambush hunters. And so as a result, they've got those vertically slit pupils to determine and very accurately determine the distance to their prey. So turning dark quite regularly with the incoming clouds. I think it's going to be quite grey for the next few days. This little bit of sun we're going to have for a while, I think. Or poking through at least. So Janine Masson saying, afternoon, Ralph. Why does the rhino still have so much of its horn? And also, are we not supposed to not show where they are situated? So Janine, good question, because there's obviously lots of sort of issues around the rhinos, but it's all location specific, and everybody, you do have national parks that will have then, at all the national parks, they'll have the same protocols. But on private properties and different game reserves that are not part of sand parks, they have different protocols in place. So there's quite a few different tactics in this regard and techniques. And in this case, they obviously are dehorning, but this one hasn't been dehorned for a while. They normally grow back within 2 to 3 years. So maybe it's due for one. For whatever the reason, they obviously happy with us showing them, and they obviously have an excellent anti-poaching team. So, as I say, it's all location specific and the decisions of the local authority. In this case, they're quite happy for us to do so. A couple of Egyptian geese coming in onto the scene. The rhino's still just a silhouette there, I think enjoying his scratch. And the Egyptian geese coming in to disturb his peace. Right, so lovely change this and a nice little stop in down in the Eastern Cape, but it is rather dark, so I think we'll change of place. Let's go this time to the Greater Kruger Park and Naledi Dam. And back to the sunshine, where it's still probably nice and hot, having warmed up. It's getting a bit chilly in the mornings in these parts, but it still heats up to the midday. So it does make for difficult sort of guiding and moving around in these parts, because early morning you've got all the layers on. It is very cold, especially if you move out in an open game viewer. So you've got all the layers on, and by midday you're sweating and you've got to carry these things all around. So, but as I say, it does still get nice and hot in the middle of the day, cooling off as the sun hits those low angles. So they're just behind the waterhole, these elephants. I wonder if they've already had their drink. Now they're slowly moving off. One elephant hiding behind the pole. We won't be able to watch him. I'm assuming these are a couple of young bulls. So a nice little tour of the area. Getting nice and dry, everything turning brown. There's the little well. And where the elephants like having a splash. There was a sighting quite a while ago with one of the other naturalists of a leopard here that came for a drink in the middle of the day and then lay up in the shade. So there's always a chance. You never can tell. And leopards are also not exclusively nocturnal. They will move around during the day and sometimes surprisingly so. Obviously their activity preference is more so at night, but in winter especially they can move around quite a lot during the day, depending on what they've been up to. Oh, and we've got another youngster. Maybe it's that one that was hiding behind the pole. He's come in for a drink. And Georgie M saying busy studying for my final year law exams here in Stellenbosch. Been so comforting to have Wild Earth on every day. Well, good luck, Georgie. Hope you give it horns. And glad that we could be of assistance. Then Catherine saying it's freezing cold here with 9 degrees and pouring rain. Would prefer to be in South Africa. Wondering where you are in the world, Catherine. Maybe in the UK as well. There seems to be a few viewers and not enjoying the cold and rain. Anyway, Joanne Mello saying good Friday, Wild Earth and Ralph. Straight back at Joanne. I'm on board once again. I thought I could hear another one moving in. Another one coming in, making the circle bigger. Looks like it's all the young bulls. And another one, even bigger. Bit of action going on in the background there. I think it's looks like a couple of impala rams chasing each other around. At the mid, it's a couple of impala just running through there. So Joanne Mello made a very good point, saying that I hope Georgie M is environmental law, and I'd definitely have to agree with you, Joanne. Georgie M, if you haven't already, maybe you can specialize in environmental law. We need some more wildlife warriors. The cases of many instances, especially around environmental impact assessments and them being sort of pushed through when they shouldn't be. So we need the likes of environmental lawyers, but good luck regardless. Oh, very special indeed. See how they put the trunk in each other's mouth? Very much part of the greeting ceremony. And sort of also continuing on their social bond. I would liken that a little bit to like a hug or a kiss, or at least an embrace. So it's not all nasty. It can be nice to each other. What a lovely close-up sighting this is turning into. So Trent wanted to know, is it better to pay attention to the elephant's trunk or tail when trying to read and gauge their moods and behavior? Trent, I would look more so at the trunk. It's so much a part of their mood, and it's a part of their face. It's very much like facial expressions, but not the be all and end all, because somebody could make funny facial expressions, but their body language would be telling you something completely different. However, even us as humans, we look at each other's faces and judge the sort of mood of the person a lot by that. And mainly you do the same with elephants as well. It's their sort of face area, their ears, their trunk, and then their demeanor. And the tail is then used as an additive to that behavior, in that if it's stiff and rigid, obviously there is kind of stress, angst, anger, aggression. It does just in a form of expression from the animal, and so it could mean any of those things, but definitely not relaxed. So, but with the facial expressions, the trunk and the ears, this is where we're told a lot more as well. On many occasions, when I've been in close encounters with big bull elephants, especially, they sort of start what we call pseudo feeding. They're pretending to feed, so they sort of turn to the side, even though you're in a very close encounter within 10 meters. And he starts sort of pulling off branches and putting them in his mouth, but then they just, the branches fall out of his mouth. So it's almost like, I wouldn't say nervous, but almost a distraction, doing something else, but meanwhile focusing on you. And I've seen it on a regular basis, especially in those close encounters. And we're both nervous, a little bit under stress, and thinking what to do next. And I've seen almost that happening with the bulls as one of their traits, that they're not quite sure. With the younger bulls, very often trying their utmost to make themselves look bigger than they are, and not, especially when they're not very sure of themselves, and they overdo it. And you can equate that to somebody that's not quite sure of themselves, but being very aggressive and pretending to be. But just from the body language, you can tell that she's not quite sure. With the big older bulls, they don't really need to put the ears out to make themselves look bigger. They're very confident. They're sure of themselves. And so you don't find this kind of nervous behavior coming from the more experienced chaps. More so from the youngsters. And another one joining. Fantastic. And just a response from Georgie M saying, I've actually chosen environmental as one of my second semester electives. Super excited. We're going to get another warrior for wildlife. Fantastic. Thanks, Georgie M. It's good news. And that's Joanne Mello. And Spaz Lankov was saying, I've studied environmental law in my ecology degree, Ralph, but such a job doesn't even exist here, sadly. Well, I mean, obviously with us, we've still got a lot of wilderness areas, but there's a lot of encroachment upon that. And whenever there's developments on especially sensitive sites, there's a lot that is in our law that protects the wildlife and the rights of the people to it that live there. So whenever there's developments, there needs to be environmental impact assessments done. But very often these slip through where developments occur where they shouldn't. But it needs to be checked properly, and the environmental lawyers, we need them on our side, that's for sure. Some of the biggest high profiles that just happened recently was with a big oil company that wanted to mine line offshore in South Africa, and they obviously were able to stop them through not only lobbying and activism, but also obviously through directly through. So, and there were a lot of environmental lawyers involved there. So, definitely need them. So it's really interesting. It looks like all these young bulls have joined up. Maybe it's just happened because it's here at the hole. They've all congregated now. Maybe not always walking together. Okay, so it seems like it's elephants all round, but I've really enjoyed this. But I think it's time to change of place now, and let's head back to the Tembe Elephant Park. And I'm just having a look online because a lot of these big bulls, especially, are named. So I'm going to see if I can actually identify. I think this one on the right, he's got big enough tusks that they've probably named him. And we'll see if we can get an ID on him, and I'll let you know. But in the meantime, Sanjeev Roy saying young bulls are like college-going boys, always mischievous and disciplined. So good principle. old bull is vital. Absolutely. Must agree with you on all of those points, Sanjeev Roy. It's for me, I liken a lot of the elephant life cycle as well as their behavior to humans, because we do share a lot of similarities. Then Lady Macbeth saying latest safari selling point appears to be the big 7 in Kruger, as opposed to the coastal reserves, which add whales and great whites to the big 5. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure about a big 7 in the Kruger. I'll have to have a look at that. I'm wondering who are the two additions. But, down the coastline from KwaZulu-Natal into the Eastern Cape and Western Cape, it has been one of those added, or couple of added animals onto that, with the big 7. Now, I'm just having a look at the descriptions on the identification of the different elephants on Tembe, and there's one that I'm looking quite closely at. You can actually have a look at it. It's tuskersofafrica.com, and it's part of the Tembe within that website. And they've got the identification of the different big bulls. And I'm just trying to see his left ear, because there's one that the tusks look very similar. His name's Totoza, but they say that he's got a ragged left ear. So I'm just trying to check if there's anything raggedy about his left ear to see if we can confirm or not. So Lady Macbeth's just answering, saying that adding wild dogs and cheetah is now part of the big 7. I see. Well, whatever they have to do to market and bring people on safari, I suppose. Trent was asking, when elephants face each other and stay still, is it a conversation? It can be, Trent. It can also just be a bit of a standoff, for instance. But it's hard to tell, because a lot of which we can't hear. So even if they are speaking of something, you can assume so. Now, he does have very raggedy ears on the ends of them. You can see quite tattered. So there's a couple of potential names, but I think it might be Chotoza. The only info I've got to go on is a picture of him, as well as a ragged left ear, both tusks curved inwards. But not 100% certain. So the impala obviously also enjoying this area around the waterholes. Lovely mixed browse, and they're mixed feeders, so perfect. In time for a lovely dust bath, getting it right in under the belly and up over the shoulders, behind the ears. So I think he's had enough dust and dust bathing. He's going to go off. Okay, so now that they're all moving off, I think we'll do the same, but let's change of place completely and let's go to Namibia and Okokoyo. With another nice big elephant bull. A few animals moving through in the background. I think it might be springbok, and then there's zebra. Looks like there might be some wildebeest off in the distance. I'm hoping some oryx or gemsbok come down too. And in these parts, they've had quite a lot of east wind and east weather in Namibia, especially down at the coast over the last few days. I'm not sure, it might have swung around a little bit, but you can see a bit of a breeze going over the top of the water in an easterly direction. So I think it continues. It always happens at this time of the year, as we've been experienced on the east coast of South Africa, on the west coast of Namibia. They get that same berg winds coming down towards the ocean, bringing it with it a lot of hot air. And very often these elephants hang around here quite a lot longer than at some of the waterholes because they make a bit more wind over it. It's quite far to their feeding grounds from here. As you can see off in the distance, the tree line there. And so that's off to the west. It's also similar heading off to the south. So I think they just make the most of it before they have to leave and then walk long distances. And the closest waterhole from here is a minimum of 10 kilometers in any direction. So it's obviously important for them to drink their fill. So I wonder if he's had enough now and he's slowly going to make his way out of here, or is he going to have a dust bath? He may take his time, as these big bulls do. You can hear a grey hornbill calling. It's quite raptor-like, often confused with birds of prey. So Trent asking, what are the chances of an inexperienced person walking through a Big Five wilderness area, perhaps unknowingly, and make it to their destination safely? Um, Trent, I think depends on what time of the day it is. If you go in the middle of the day, you'll stand a much better chance than if you go in the early mornings or late afternoons, because the predators are still active around those times. So you might happen upon them, but still, even then, we even have in the likes of the Kruger National Park. There's pathways that go cut through the park, and a lot of people walk through from Zimbabwe to come and do their shopping in South Africa, but they walk right through the Kruger Park. But people that live in villages that are close to the park, and so I'm sure would be a lot more savvy than your average urban person. So I think you've probably got a decent chance of making it, but it all depends on what you happen upon. So you might get lucky a few times, and then you bump into an elephant or a lion or something, and then it might be a little bit different. Generally, I would say that the most dangerous animals for me on foot are elephants, buffalo, and black rhino. So meeting one of those three, you never know what's going to happen. Whereas with the predators, they generally, especially if it's during daylight hours, they're not really an issue. They respect us as humans, as an apex predator. They wouldn't necessarily just attack. And it's actually quite disappointing sometimes on foot, because the predators normally run away from you. They're different creatures at night, totally different beast. Darkness hours. That's one of the reasons I will never walk in the dark unless it's absolutely necessary. I have to, but it was for the sake of an emergency. So that's the only reasons I would do it. Otherwise, it's daytime hours, and you got to have your wits, that's for sure, and also know what you're doing. But there are people that do it, and they survive. I think sometimes, very often, good in numbers. There's a few, and as I say, they generally do understand wild animals would be in and around their villages as well. Always nice to see lovely big groups of zebra coming down for a drink. But lovely scene this is. Always lovely to stop in here. But let's change of place, back to the Greater Kruger Park and Cat Eye. With lots of elephants once again, and I really like these perspectives of looking up at them, and they're nice and close as well. Now, Lady Macbeth was saying the perspective here is deceptive. This would be at Okupuyo. The tree line is closer than it seems on camera. Ladybug Beth, it sounds like you've been there, and I've also been there many, many times. You are right in that it does seem further, but it's still not close. It's quite a walk to get to that trees. And the difference that I'm making there is that you look at all of these waterholes in the Greater Kruger, for instance, and even at Old Donyo, you can see there's browse and feed, within the direct vicinity of the waterhole. In Etosha, they've got a long way to go in general, to the feeding areas and between the feeding areas and the water. So they do tend to spend quite a bit of time there at that waterhole, as I would assume they sieve it and then head to where they feed, and only when they really get thirsty once again will they make the trek back to the water, which is still quite a distance from those feeding grounds. Tara was asking, hi Ralph, would a female in estrus ever pursue a male elephant, or is it always the male being chased? So Tara, generally, yes, it's the male. It all depends on the population dynamics within a given area. If there was a low concentration of bulls over a wide, you may have the potential for, female bulls coming to estrus. But generally, when there's a lot of bulls around, they will make their way with no, sort of lowering the necessity for the females to go looking for males. And with that 60% extra testosterone, or 60 times more, it really does drive those bulls to go looking for the females. So they generally don't have a problem in the amount of bulls coming in. In fact, it's more of bulls in must coming into herds that want to mate with no females that are in estrus. Then it becomes quite a stressful affair. And they just try and sort of move away from the bull who keeps pursuing, and so that the herd then pretty much has to maintain, keep on the move. And it can be quite stressful for them, as I say, because then he does get angry, he starts pushing over trees and getting aggressive, and it can be a problem around the youngsters. So I've seen it quite a lot where that occurs, and there's no females in estrus, but a bull coming in, and he does become a bit of a pain. Okay, so with most of them having now left, I think we'll do the same. Let's go back to the Tembe Elephant Park. With yet more elephants. Someone stolen the show today. Well, I'm not complaining, that's for sure. And something I'd just like to mention is about the Amakhala Private Safari, which will be taking place on the Amakhala Game Reserve later on in December this year. And you can discover the wild heart of South Africa on a safari adventure with me in person. And there's limited space available for 6 lucky guests on the safari in December. If you'd like to know more about it, please go onto the Wild Earth website and click on travel. In the UK was asking, good afternoon, Ralph. Are there any diseases that elephants are susceptible to? And Shanae from the Sandparks website, they speak of saying that elephants are relatively free from most fatal diseases. They may die from blood diseases such as septicemia, contracted from infected wounds or after childbirth. They're also susceptible to anthrax, tuberculosis, and foot and mouth disease. So those are probably the three major ones. In 2004, anthrax out in the eastern Caprivi region of Namibia and Chobe National Park in Botswana both caused a number of elephant deaths. Antibacterial infection contracted through direct contact with infected carcasses or inhalation of anthrax spores. And it causes bleeding from the mouth and other body openings, and death is sudden. But due to their longevity, older elephants also suffer from conditions associated with old age, such as cardiovascular disease, and they're liable to heart attacks and strokes. And that's when we would say they died of natural causes, but that's very often ultimately what actually happens. Potentially one of the largest living animals on Earth, the elephant can live for 65 years or more. And as we've mentioned many times, that a very large limiting factor for their life expectation is their teeth, because once the final molars has been worn down, the elephant loses the ability to grind and adequately digest the last activities of cortation, pick up the bulk of their diet. So they eventually succumb to the effects of malnutrition, and that's when you can start to get those cardiovascular diseases, hearts. But then going further as well, and actually many elephants die from natural causes, just like humans. They can suffer from life-threatening diseases or abnormalities. They can also be affected by environmental conditions quite heavily, such as drought. They may sustain fatal injuries to accidents or fights with other individuals. But even if elephants lead a long and healthy life, they'll finally die of starvation, or at least that will be a major factor when their teeth can no longer function properly. Serious drought conditions can cause elephant deaths. Teenage animals are often most susceptible, as they're not then large enough to reach the tallest trees and must compete with other species to browse at lower levels. So unlike their younger brothers or sisters, they're no longer able to suckle from their mother. We won't allow them to. So in 1974, there were 9,000 elephants starved to death in a severe drought in the Tsavo National Park in Kenya. And in 2005, several months of drought conditions in the Hwange National Park in Zimbabwe caused severe water shortages. Grazing was scarce, waterholes dried up, and at least 40 elephants died from starvation and dehydration. So I think it all depends on the environment that they're in, and the resources and the availability of them. And it's so lovely just to watch elephants that are obviously happy because they're sort of engaging in play, And stressed animals generally won't do that. So it's a very good indication of a happy, healthy sort of population of elephants. There's a scrub robin calling now. Can you hear pearl-spotted owlet calling off in the background? So Bill the Bull was asking, Ralph, I've seen prides of lions there at night on the Tembe cam. One lioness with a collar. Any idea if the pride there on the reserve have a name? So I've just been doing a bit of digging around, Bill, and they say that Tembe is home to a number of lions who frequent the Tembe waterhole from the Mahlasela hide. I'm not quite sure exactly where the hide is. Maybe it's near to here. You can see the male lion M179 as well as F70 or mum. There's a mother, to greedy, Rolo, and Astarte. But it looks like there's three prides: the southern pride, the central pride, and the northern pride. Obviously, in the different parts of the reserve. But I'll keep on doing a bit more digging and see if we can find out the individuals that you've been seeing. And now just a little bit of history of the Tembe lions that I found on the Tembe Elephant Park Facebook page. They say, and this was in 2016, so a little while ago. However, they just speak on the history of them. So 4 lions were captured at Madikwe Game Reserve in northern South Africa, and they were relocated. In 2002, that was 4 lions, 2 male, 2 female, were introduced into the park from Madikwe. In fact, the 2 males were from Madikwe and the 2 females were from the Pilansberg. Males were unrelated to maximize the genetic diversity, being introduced into the park and to prevent inbreeding. And Campa, who was one of the original females, still patrols the southern section of the reserve and is now nearly 17 years old. Okay, if she's still alive, she'll be well over 20. So to date, there's over 35 lions on the reserve, with a new set of genes to be brought in on South Africa's east coast, but that was in 2002. Okay, so then the return of the lion to make it a genuine Big 5 reserve. I'm just going down a bit further, see what else, how many more. Okay, didn't get too much else from that. I'll see what else I can find. And Bill, you said that one of the lionesses has a collar. I'm not sure if there's any more, but definitely the female Kampa, she has a collar on, so it's potentially her, but she would be very old. It would be interesting if you could say if she looked extremely old or not. You see some female and young Nyala walking through there, just behind that elephant. There's a bull coming through as well. Setting with all the antelope there, impala and nyala, males and females. So obviously coming down to enjoy the lovely greenery just on the edges of the waterhole. Always very lush. Looks like the one bull on the left just getting shooed off by the slightly bigger bull. You can hear some grunts and snorts coming from those impala rams, getting into the rut. Going to hear lots more of that in the coming days. Right, so Bill, coming back about the lion, saying she looked in great condition. In fact, she had two sub adults with her. Okay, yeah, it seems like the Tembe pride has grown substantially. Well, the different prides within the reserve. I think there's up to about 60 of them now. So I think we'll have to just keep digging and see what information I can find. I did get a very long history on it that I didn't want to cite all of, but I'll see if I can find a bit of a summary of these particular lions. It seems some have come from the greater Kruger area, Karongwe, some have come from Pilansberg and Madikwe, so they've really got different origins, which is great and obviously keeps the genetics nice and strong. And that's generally what they try and do. So, but it would just be nice to get some updated stuff. So I'll keep digging. And pangolins galore, saying, Ralph, as a retired librarian, I appreciate the research that you do and that you cite the resources that you use when answering a question. And I think it's important, pangolins galore, because, and very often I'll find research that contradicts other stuff or information that we've imparted. And that's how I do my research. The sort of more experienced I've gotten with and being in wildlife and being a naturalist, as they call us. In the beginning, obviously, we cited a lot of sort of textbooks that we got and that we studied, both in wildlife management and as guides and the coursework that we get there. But through experience, I've actually found that some things are actually contradictory, and some things are just not quite as they sort of put them out in the text, and sometimes they're completely different. So I like to then look into the research, find different aspects, and see according to the experience. This is and then also let people make up their own minds. And I think it's important to then also have a lot of different references. You always want to try and prove yourself, but it's important to have a balanced view on anything that we're looking at. And one research study might totally contradict. One population of species in a certain area might do totally different things to another. So I think very important to keep that balanced view, and do so by have a balanced research perspective as well. And then definitely citing the references and where the information comes from, I think is important as well, because it sort of does then give credibility where it is due, and then also just add to the discussion of further evidence being presented. So just returning to that lion question, I think that it is clear that they've actually got an overpopulation of lions in the Tembe park itself. And the reason I say that is just through some investigating. There's a few different volunteer projects, one example being the Wildlife Act. They do volunteering and researching of a lot of the lion populations on Tembe. And there has been speak of that the carrying capacity is only 20 lions. Now, it seems, I don't know of the most recent numbers, but it seems there are in excess of 50 or 60 lions on the reserve. So they've apparently started a multi-pronged approach where they are aggressively seeking out places that they relocate some of the lions, and so applying contraceptives to the females, as well as tying off some of their tubes, but they say only on one side, which means that they're just limiting the sizes, so the females can still mate at birth, but then their litter sizes are just limited. So it's obvious that there is a bit of an issue, and I know that there's a problem, especially because they have Sunni here, which was the smallest antelope that you get, and they're under pressure with a growing lion population. Territorial, and I think would be, little snacks for the lions, but they could, be sort of targeted. So it's obviously quite a bad potential when you've got an overgrowing predator population. You're headed for a decrease in their prey species, which will then, sort of have a knock-on effect. But I'm sure the management is all over it. I'm going to continue researching on this point, and I hope that the next time we come back, I'm able to have a little bit more information, especially for you, Bill. Like I say, I found a very long history of the lions here, but it would have taken me half an hour to get through all of that. So maybe I'll just try and summarize that, and we have a nice, clear picture of then what the lion population is exactly on the Tembe Elephant Park. But with that being said, we're slowly heading towards the end of the show. So I hope you've all enjoyed it. As per usual, you never know what the bush is going to throw at you. And today it was lots of elephants, but totally unique as always. So thanks to you, the viewers, for joining us. And, of course, thanks to the wildlife for being the stars of the show. Later on, of course, there will be the Sunset Safari. So don't go anywhere. Lots of action coming your way with
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. This is the show where we look at the highlights from our most recent safari drives. This is On Safari.